If you have been complaining about the heat wave of late, well, we're going to be getting into that in our Kickstarter this morning. Welcome to Morning at NTV. If you're just joining, I am Rita Kanya. Now, it's important that you pay close attention to this conversation because for you, the hot nights have you failing to cover and find courage to cover yourself. But during the day, you regret putting on your best outfit because you're constantly sweating. And you'll hear someone say global warming is real. Well, the Ministry of Water and Environment has started the second edition of the Uganda Water and Environment Week, which officially kicked off on the 18th of March and will be going on to the 22nd, which is today. The commemoration is under the theme Water and Environment, a strategic driver in attainment of sustainable development goals come 2030.
Yes, and this actually came with 5 sub-themes, and the first one is water, food, energy, ecosystem nexus, and also the second one is water, environment, and society. The third sub-theme is green growth, the fourth one blue economy and SDGs. Now those are the sustainable development goals. The fifth one and finally the last one is financing sustainable development goals. And so we are joined by Minister of State for Environment, Ms. Mary Goretti Kitutu. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Let's talk about water and this particular week that has been very vibrant for the ministry. What were you able to cover with regards to these particular themes?
Well, we've been able to at least, actually we registered 800 visitors and 60 exhibitors who were giving new innovations. You know, when we talk of global warming, we have to move from what we are doing to do things that don't harm the environment. So this week, why the ministry, actually this started, I think this could be like the second year we are doing it. We try to bring the population to know the importance of our ministry of water and environment for the country to attain the sustainable development goals. And more so when we look at the SDGs, those which are very pertinent to this country is ending poverty, ending hunger, clean water and safe water, reducing the impacts of climate change, and those are the ones which we are actually trying to see that we focus on. Now also as a ministry, we try to show others how our ministry makes other ministries perform. An example is the Ministry of Agriculture, which is so dependent. If the Ministry of Water and Environment sneezes, agriculture and energy will also sneeze.
That's very true.
Yes. Yesterday I must congratulate all Ugandans that we added another new dam, but that dam is dependent on water. And that's why we are always on our toes to see that we monitor the lake levels, to see that everything is going on smoothly. Any drop in the water levels means there will be no power, and no power, all other sectors, the industries will not perform, then people become jobless. So you can see how the line goes. So that's why we bring Ugandans to understand our ministry. Now also financing. We are not just a mere ministry. We need to be singled out and given priority. And many times, sometimes you find that our colleagues in finance put their unfunded priorities, and you find some of them are even under environment. Now, particularly this week or this season, we've just come from Chankwanzi, and what I must say is that we sweated and sweated. And all of us were there in government. His Excellency, the Vice President, and I personally saw the Vice President sweating until he had to go and take refuge under a tree. So this really pleased me because the only refuge was a tree, because everywhere was hot, and actually all the trees were on high demand, the shades. That's where you would have life. And this is a good lesson for us, that without a tree there is no life. That's how God made trees. Once you are under a tree, everything changes. So why this heat wave? We all know that in Uganda, at this time, we should be receiving our rains.
Yes.
But instead, we are having a heat wave. Now, this is a new phenomenon. It has never occurred. And you've all seen that Mozambique is flooding. So why we are experiencing this heat is because of the cyclones which are now in the Indian Ocean. You know, 60% of our rainfall comes from that ocean. And the 40 is what is locally generated from the wetlands, the forests, and also our neighbors, Sudan, and that is South Sudan, and the DRC, Congo forests also send us some rain. Now, what has happened is there is a phenomenon in the Indian Ocean where most of the water has been sucked into the cyclone. Now, the winds which used to blow northwards and bring for us rains are now moving round over the Indian Ocean and actually sending too much rain to our brothers and sisters in Mozambique, like what you saw.
Yes.
So leaving the upper areas in the north without water, and that's why we're having this heat.
So what do we do?
So this is now why it is important. And I remember I mentioned one time that we don't have much control over the 60% of the rainfall that is externally generated.
Yes.
But the 40%, actually yesterday I talked to the executive director of the Meteorology Authority with the scientists in that institution to monitor the performance of this 40%. You can now see, that's why you were telling me it was raining in Kayunga.
And we're
actually
hoping in Kampala.
yesterday it rained in Munyonyo, Entebbe was dry. So that is how our 40% works, because there are certain features or certain ecosystems which influence the rain around you. And once you remove it, then you don't have it.
Thank you for mentioning that, because speaking of this 40% that we really need to guard dearly and make sure that we don't, eradicate the factors that actually help us attain the 40%. Let's talk of illegal logging. The cutting down of trees in the forests. It's been a racket. We've been seeing it top headlines in the news. What is the ministry doing to ensure that these people are actually brought to book and the trend of illegal logging is stopped immediately?
Now, illegal logging, like you've said, is illegal, and we highly condemn it. And some people have gone as far as cutting trees, which we have marked as protected trees. You know, I must also say that the law, the Forest Act of 2003, there were some shortfalls in that law, whereby forests which are on private land, that is on my land and on your land, were left without control of government, which used not to be the case in the past. Because in the past, if you had a forest, or government had control of all the natural trees, which were everywhere. But that law of 2003, I'm sorry, that's what we are trying to do to rectify. And it was not the ministry or government side, but it was parliament. So that's why sometimes when we are making laws, let's not try to make laws that please us, but let's look ahead and make a law that may not hamper us. Maybe those who did it at that time didn't know that maybe they are trying to please the population. And actually, because of that law, we've lost about 2 million hectares of natural forests on private land. So sometimes when you hit me as a Minister of Environment, most of the trees I've lost are on private land, on individuals. Me and you and all your parents and every Ugandan has contributed towards this loss. Now, the Central Forest Reserves and the local forest reserves, the Central Forest Reserves are under my ministry, and they are taken care of by the National Forest Authority. And some of them are under Uganda Wildlife Authority. So under this, we had around 1.5 million hectares, and we lost around 400,000. And we've been able to restore around 200,000.
What exactly happened? How did we lose the 400,000?
Of course, after it is the same communities. Have you seen? We've been fighting with the communities. Every day, actually, we are in firefighting.
With the communities.
As I speak now, I'm now heading to the west to try to sweet talk people, Ugandans, to say, look, You either move out of the forest or we die. And actually, I want to warn everybody that we should not even get worried that the earth is going to get finished. It is us who are going to be wiped off the planet. Because when it becomes too hot, the predictions is we are going to get diseases which we are not even prepared for. And once these fevers come, we shall just be wiped off the planet.
But Honorable, as you talk about how now the government is doing their bit and trying to make sure a few laws come into place. Each and every person, we may not be in a forest or doing something, but what are we doing? What are we planting that perhaps could help? In your compound at home or in your plot of land in the village, what should people be looking at to help with our environment?
This is what I'm persuading every Ugandan, that we should all plant trees. As I speak now, I have for this season 10 million seedlings in the National Forest Authority for planting. These are for all Ugandans. In the ministry, we have about 8 million just for this season. So that's around 8 million trees. If we planted these trees and looked after them well, that should be an addition of 8 million trees to our tree, what I can say that. And of course, where we are going to plant on private land. But still, I've also traversed the country. I was in Mubende. Well, Mubende is not so bad because that is a savanna, that is a cattle corridor, and the vegetation there is not worrying me much. But I'm more worried of areas like the Bunyoro, that Bunyoro area, the northern. That's where I'm losing most of the trees. And the most notorious area in terms of the Central Forest Reserve is the Sangobe. That makes me have sleepless nights. And I've lost 5 guards. And this should also go on record because these are people's children who were cut into pieces by these Ugandans who think they should go into Central Forest Reserves and just cut trees as they wish. So I'm appealing to all Ugandans that God gave us this country. Actually, when we were in Kyankwanzi, I was very happy. I've been moving in the world looking for this area where they call, where God created, and they say it was called what? The Garden of Eden. Who has ever seen this Garden of Eden?
Can we make our own here?
Honorable, the pictures
to me, I think the Garden of Eden is here in Uganda because I don't see any country that beats us in terms of a good climate, food. Ugandans have enough, despite all these challenges. When you go, people have enough on their plates.
Honorable, I'll be asking the director to play these pictures again of the trees that have been cut down. And this particular site is quite worrying. Now, the question I'll be asking you, look at that. I mean, these are scenes that we see time and again. NTV did do an expose, and in the headlines, even still this year, we saw some, foreigners being, put behind bars just because of this. So what are the implications of what, pretty much guidelines or, safeguards has the ministry put to ensure that if at all, you're caught in this, you face the law, and protecting the forest such that even by the time someone thinks of doing this, getting involved in illegal logging, they get to think twice, thrice, even 4 times before they even do it. What are those safeguards that you're putting in place to discourage this?
Now, the law is there, and I think the only challenge where we have is on enforcement. And more so, like I told you, that these trees are on private land. Like now, that is the Aphezelia, and then another tree where people are going for is this shea nut tree, a very expensive tree.
Quite expensive.
So the Aphezelia takes around, these trees have taken around 100 years. And people go to these unsuspected communities who are not aware. Actually, when we talk of the natural capital, the natural wealth, that is their wealth. But because these communities are now, that's what we're trying to sensitize them through the kingdoms. I've already met some of the cultural leaders to help me sensitize, and so that people can value these as their natural capital, because those trees, you can be able to use the shea nut to generate. I was reading that there are now about 300 beauty products.
Yes, from shea butter.
Yes, from shea butter. And now for Aphezelia also, it is also medicinal. It's bark. So people go and cut these trees at a very cheap price. When we try to investigate, people are given like 2 million. And these people go and cut these logs. We call it illegal because sometimes we have trailed these people. I personally have even sat in some of the meetings where they call me, come, and now can you help us clear these, give us your letter so that we can be able to transport these logs. And what they do, they move them in lorries that are like box. So they cut them in 2 pieces and load them like they are transporting goods. Then they bring them to the railway station here. And from there, then they dispatch it. It is unfortunate that I'm naming this and shaming that the people who are supposed to be supporting me in fighting this, sometimes the police, and these I have reports where the police are also involved. Even sometimes the army. I'm not saying that all of them, but we have names where some of them are involved. So you find that these are the people who are supposed to be supporting me as a ministry to counter this.
And Honorable, if you have the names,
yes,
how much more is the
because is it something also about, as you talk about sensitization and how the communities are not even aware that these trees are important to us, do you think on the part of the enforcement they also require sensitization of some end, to some extent?
And that's what we are doing, sensitizing, and some of them, of course, like being punished. You know, what I do is I report to my other colleague, like of defense and also of internal affairs. I've already shared with them these reports, and I've also taken action in sometimes transferring, and some of these officers also losing ranks.
Okay, there's something you mentioned earlier which now goes away from everything, which is the cyclone that's happening in southeastern Africa.
Yes.
One would, as a Ugandan, we're wondering, can that affect us and our environment at any one point? Can
it be predicted? It has already affected us, because instead of us getting rain, we are getting what?
No, could we see it coming to our end?
Yes,
the cyclone.
Of course, we are seeing now. It may not reach. Like by the time maybe it reaches Uganda, it will have weakened. Like already the system is weakening. It may not reach us, but we have to look at other impacts. Like now, in Busoga, I'm already getting reports. The lake, you know, the lake Ozo has strong winds which blow northwards. And because we destroyed the forests that used to act as buffers, already I'm receiving reports, especially in the areas of Busoga, these northern winds which blow, you find people's crops falling northwards, or sometimes roofs being blown off of schools, of houses. So we are already seeing the impacts. It is not that they are very far to be seen. We already see this. And some of the predictions under climate change is erratic weather. And when the weather is erratic, that means we can, like for us, we're in the tropics. A system can build up within 10 minutes and you have a storm.
Right.
This we've ever experienced. I flew in a helicopter from Kasese to Kololo. And you see, we were in a clear weather. But when we landed in Kololo safely, 10 minutes. Within just 10 minutes, by the time we reached Hotel Africana, there was a huge storm. So this shows you how our system is.
Okay.
It is very erratic, and this is how we are going to be impacted. So what should we do? We should be able to adapt and mitigate.
Honorable, you mentioned that you actually, the ministry has names of some of the security officials who gang up with this illegal loggers and do this, who are acting against your will. Maybe just for the sake of someone who is watching us, would you sound a warning to them, stipulating the consequences if anyone is caught on the wrong side of the law with regards to the same?
Actually, the consequences are great, because even when we're in Chankwanzi, the directive from the president is nobody should be in the Central Forest Reserve, nobody should go into the wetlands. All lake shores and river banks should be protected. So if a head of state has sounded that, now who should be that? So all these officers, like I've said, that we've not just sat, even some of my officers already, we've dismissed about 20 officers from NFA and more. We are still investigating. So all those who have been found to be part of the racket which has been doing that will be removed, and even other laws like okay, you lose your job and you can go into prison if we have really enough evidence. But otherwise, chasing you away is good enough, because by the time you get another job, at least I know you will have learned a lesson. But what I'm sounding a warning is for security organs who are supposed to give us support, those who go and hide. And what we were told, actually what they do is, all Ugandans, I want you to know this. My people who are supposed to be protecting, although the foot soldiers, the NFA team and the ministry, I'm told when these people go and cut the trees, they load them in the trucks. Then my people come pretending to be arresting them. Then when they arrest these, of course, what the law says, they arrest and bring in our compounds of NFA. And the law says that we dispose them off through maybe public auction. So they bring that under that cover. You can imagine helping to transport. So they pass all the roadblocks with all the documents that we are now taking impounded timber to Kampala, and that timber never arrives here. So that is how we discovered that. And we are aware. So Uganda should know that we know the roots, but sometimes when it should be the people to help us capture these thieves who are doing it, it becomes a bit what, but we are doing our best. And I'm urging also the communities to be vigilant and report these people. Like some have been good. They bring to me reports which have helped me, and we are able to counter this. And at least warn them. And I must thank my colleagues, the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Internal Affairs. They have always acted. Whenever you give them names, they know how they do it in their circles.
So, Minister, as we leave this conversation, today is World Water Day, the 22nd of March, 2019. And the theme this year is that leave no one behind. It is a basic human right for one to access water. But where would you put Uganda in terms of making and having people accessing water?
Now, for Uganda, right now we stand at 70% of Ugandans they have access to clean, safe water. But one of the targets under Kisanja Hakuna Mchezo is we have to hit 100% come 2020. So the other areas where water has not reached is not because of us, the ministry, but it's because these areas don't have any surface water. When you go to look for water underground, it's not there. So it now only requires bulk water movement from somewhere, like some of the areas like in the southwest, in Sinjiro, there is Bukoma, Simbi. Some of those areas we have to get water from as far as Lake Victoria or River Kagera. Now all these water systems, River Kagera, we need to have agreements with Tanzania, and this we have already secured. Then with Lake Victoria, you have to have agreements almost up to Egypt. So that's why we have some of those shortfalls. So it is not that we are relaxed and just watching these Ugandans without water, but they are in a situation where we cannot easily get water for them. To get water there, it should be transferred from somewhere far, and this requires some bit of money. So we have to secure the money, and that's why whenever we request you Ugandans that let's add on more taxes. Don't go on the streets. Because we need to pay the taxes, then we can be able to access the services.
All right, Honorable, thank you so much. And we're getting a question as we come to a close. Someone is asking, laying off this particular, officers who are found on the wrong side of the law, is it consequence enough? Should the ministry think of harsher penalties so that it can put people at bay or away from committing such crimes? Is that something that the ministry is doing, making sure that we have more strong consequences or more harsh consequences such that people keep away?
Yes, like we now have a new law. Actually, we now have a new act. The president has already ascended on the bill. It is now a law, and in that law we have made the fines are now heavier and also the penalties, because in the past that's why people were even doing these wrong things. You find a fine of 200,000. Cecile, that one just pays off and just shakes off and goes to cut the next tree. But the roads are now stronger, and as I speak now, under NFA we've requested for more police for training, but where we are heading to, we would want to have a dedicated institution, like the way Uganda Wildlife Authority and URA have done.
All right.
So that's where we are heading to. But as we do that, because it is us ourselves who are cutting these trees, let's protect these so that we don't, you know, enforcement by there also is very expensive, and that money would go somewhere else, maybe to provide health services. So if we would all be doing the good things. Another thing which I want to talk about is throwing rubbish anywhere.
All right.
And I'm also coming up with the anti-litter law, because that is again another way of strengthening the law. I've been watching, even when you are following vehicles, sometimes V8s, throwing bottles through windows. This should also stop.
All right.
It should really stop. Ugandans, they stop littering. And we look at where we put the rubbish. It is not good for us. It is not good for tourism. Whenever we go out, people talk about our country as very beautiful. But then at first they used to complain about the traffic jam from Entebbe. But now wherever I go, they say, thank you, you've solved that. And you need to commend the government for this.
Yes, Honorable.
Definitely.
And of course, we'll bring you back after you have that particular law in place. We have quite a lot to talk about, but thank you so much for coming in studio as Minister of State for Environment, Miss actually Honorable Mary Goretti Kitutu, for coming in studios. What are your questions? The hashtag is morning@NTV. It's time now for us to tell you how the roads look like. So we'll be linking to Stephen Mbide, who is in Kabalagala. Good morning, Stephen. Good morning. Good morning, Stephen.
A very good morning to you. We are coming to you live from Kabalagala, and if you are in the neighborhood like Buziga, Kansanga, Machindi and Zambia areas, just know that right now driving from the areas